Hello and welcome to HBM's Crypto-Corner for Wednesday, January 25th, 2023. We have quite a few things to talk about, so let's get started. First of all, we want to note a cryptozoological passing. Redmond Mullis passed away the other night. He was in his 50s and he established the Bigfootology website. And there was an interview on YouTube with Bob Gimlin by Redmond from 2011. Very good interview, by the way. I recommend everybody seek it out on YouTube. Now, we have an interesting article that actually comes from 2007, but I think it's still relevant even today. Bigfoot anatomy. Sasquatch is just a legend, right? According to the evidence, maybe not, argues Jeffrey Meldrum, a position he holds despite ostracism from his fellow anthropologists and university colleagues. One overcast Sunday morning in 1996, Jeffrey Meldrum and his brother drove to Walla Walla, Washington to see if they could find Paul Freeman, a man renowned in Bigfoot circles as a source of footprint casts. Meldrum, who has followed Bigfoot lore since he was a boy, had heard that Freeman was a hoaxer. So I was very dubious, he recalls. The brothers arrived unannounced, Meldrum says, and chatted with Freeman about his collection. Freeman said he had found tracks just that morning, but they were not good, not worth casting. The brothers wanted to see them regardless. I thought we could use this to study the anatomy of a hoax, Meldrum says. Instead, Meldrum's visit to a ridge in the Blue Mountains set him firmly on a quest he has been on since. Meldrum, an associate professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University, is an expert on foot morphology and locomotion in monkeys, apes, and hominids. He has studied the evolution of bipedalism and edited From Biped to Strider, Springer, 2004, a well-respected textbook. He brought his anatomical expertise to the site outside Walla Walla. The 14-inch long prints Freeman showed him were interesting, Meldrum says, because some turned out at a 45-degree angle, suggesting that whatever made them had looked back over its shoulder. Some showed skin whorls, some were flat with distinctive anatomical detail, others were of running feet. Imprints on the front part of the foot only, of toes gripping the mud. Meldrum made casts and decided it would be hard to hoax the running footprints unless you had some device, some cable-loaded flexible toes. To Meldrum, the anatomy captured in those prints and the casts of others he has examined, as well as still unidentified hairs, recordings of strange calls, and certain witness testimonials, all add up to valid evidence that warrants study. He reviews that evidence in Sasquatch, Legend Meets Science, Forged, 2006. My book is not an attempt to convince people of the existence of Sasquatch, the 49-year-old Meldrum says emphatically. Rather, it argues that the evidence that exists fully justifies the investigation and the pursuit of this question. To Meldrum's critics, including university colleagues and scientists in his own field, that same collection does not constitute valid evidence, and Meldrum's examination of it is pseudoscientific, belief shrouded in the language of scientific rigor and analysis. Even if you have a million pieces of evidence, if all the evidence is inconclusive, you can't count it all up to make something conclusive, says David J. Dagling, an anthropologist at the University of Florida who has critiqued Meldrum and the Bigfoot Quest in the Skeptical Inquirer, and is the author of Bigfoot Exposed, Altamira, 2004. Neither side can win its case without a Sasquatch specimen or fossil, or without the true confessions of a fleet of perhaps fleet-footed hoaxers. In the meantime, observers watch the debate that is striking in that both sides use virtually the same language, refute each other's interpretations with the same tone of disbelief, and insist they have the identical goal, honoring the scientific method. And the question of how science on the fringe should be dealt with remains open. Some observers, say Meldrum, who has been lambasted by colleagues and passed over for promotion twice, should just be left alone to do his thing. Others counter that in this era of creationism, global warming denial, and widespread anti-science sentiment and scientific illiteracy, it is particularly imperative that bad science be soundly criticized and exposed. Meldrum is a tall, mustached man, relaxed, friendly, and gregarious. On a recent summer morning in his office, rich in Bigfoot paraphernalia, he explains that his interest in the subject arose when he was 11 and saw Roger Patterson's now famous film of an alleged Sasquatch loping into the forest. Meldrum listed cryptozoology, the study of hidden creatures such as Yeti and Nessie, as an interest on his vitae when he applied for doctoral work. But Bigfoot as an active pursuit did not emerge until he arrived at Idaho State University in 1993 and was back in the Pacific Northwest, where he grew up. Meldrum's laboratory houses more than 200 casts relating to Bigfoot. As he pulls out drawers and talks about the casts, Meldrum shows ones with the hallmarks of hoax and others that intrigue him because of anatomy, hair striations, musculature, and apparent metatarsal break. A pair of joints in the middle of the ape foot that have less mobility than the human foot because of the arch. He brings out a particularly controversial piece called the Skookum Cast that he thinks may be of a reclining Sasquatch and others think may be of a reclining elk. There is a chance we are wrong, he says, but with the footprints I feel more certain. Discounting the unusual cast isn't scientific in the least, Meldrum maintains. It is irresponsible. He does bring more scientific rigor to this question than anyone else in the past, and he does do state-of-the-art footprint analysis, notes David R. Began, a paleoanthropologist at the University of Toronto. Todd R. Distel, a New York University anthropologist, agrees. He is trying to bring rigor to it. Both researchers collaborate with Meldrum, even though they do not accept his hypothesis that a large ape-like creature exists. If he hands me a feces sample or a blood stain or a hair shaft, I am willing to do what I do with anything I get, Distel says. I go along with this because I am either doing good science, finding alternatives, or debunking, or I have the find of the century. Distel gets Bigfoot jibes over beers sometimes, but nothing similar to what Meldrum experiences. I think what is happening to him is a shame. In his famous Cargo Cult Science lecture in 1974, Richard Feynman describes scientific thinking and integrity as a kind of utter honesty, a kind of leaning over backwards to raise and examine every doubt, every interpretation. This kind of thinking, critics say, is missing from Meldrum's Bigfoot work, whereas it infuses his fossil and primate gait research. Meldrum's principal critic from his own field is Daegling, who concludes that the evidence doesn't look much better on deeper analysis, it looks worse. He adds that this isn't about Bigfoot, it is about how scientists go about doing their work and how we should be self-reflective and self-critical. Meldrum responds by saying that most people do not see him critically sifting through all the evidence that comes his way and discarding most of it. But if he is at times frustrated and beleaguered by skeptics, it appears some in this community are beleaguered by his exhortation that more researchers accept his interpretations or become involved. In reviewing Meldrum's and Daegling's books in the American Journal of Physical Anthropology, Matt Cartmill of Duke University concludes that if the chances of Bigfoot being real are 1 in 10,000, his admittedly wild guess, then having one physical anthropologist on the case seems a reasonable allocation of professional resources, and that Meldrum does not deserve scorn or abuse. But Cartmill, who knows that he is morally certain there is no Sasquatch, is irked by Meldrum's trying to guilt-trip those who do Bigfoot work and is disparaging them as lazy or aloof. The tension is inevitable for science on the fringe, says Trent D. Stevens of Idaho State, who co-authored a book with Meldrum on evolutionary biology and Mormonism. As he puts it, the stuff is on the margins, the stuff that isn't popular. We scientists are horrible at judging it. and we say our mistakes about the fringe are all historical. We claim we are not making those mistakes today. The fringe has produced wonderful science and has produced wonderfully abysmal science. It has never been a comfortable place to live. So definitely the struggle is real. The struggle is real for scientists, especially like Dr. Meldrum and the late Dr. John Bindernagel. And it's unfortunate, but I guess it's just a part of all this. And hopefully one day there will be validation at some point. At least we're all hoping there is. Here's an interesting article: Bigfoot in Pennsylvania. All the info, time, and what took place from the state's one reported sighting last year. Is Bigfoot out there somewhere roaming around? Well, the folks at the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization seem convinced the legendary creature exists. And if you check out their website, there's all sorts of interesting info. And one of the most interesting features is the sightings section, where you can filter sightings accounts down to state and even county. Washington State has the most reported sightings with 708, and California is second with 461, followed by Florida with 338. Pennsylvania is somewhere in the middle of the pack with 138 reported sightings. Cumberland and Dauphin County each had no reports of Bigfoot sightings, while Cambria and Allegheny are tied for the lead with 9 reported sightings. Lancaster had one sighting all the way back in 2011. Again, whether you believe in Bigfoot or not, folks are reporting that they are seeing things out and about. Which brings us to recent activity in the Bigfoot activity in the Keystone State. And well, 2022 wasn't overly active in that department. In fact, the BFRO had just one reported sighting in Pennsylvania, and it was fairly recent. In a report that has been deemed very credible, it says that 2 witnesses reported seeing a Sasquatch walking along Ghost Town Trail in Cambria County. The report says the sighting took place between Ebensburg and Nancy Glo. The report is below. On October 5th, 2022, while my boyfriend and I were biking on the Ghost Town trails near Ebensburg, Pennsylvania, we saw a Bigfoot coming about 150 yards in front of us. He was walking along the trail toward us, the reporting party wrote. We couldn't see his face. When he saw us, he turned and quickly walked to the woods. We were shocked at what we saw. As we went by, we looked into the woods and didn't see anything. We didn't stop then, but continued on until we finally stopped to talk about what we saw. It was really shocking, they continued. There were no sounds or smells. Didn't get a good look at his face, but as he was walking, you could see how big his stride was. There was a huge space between his legs. On the way back, we stopped and looked around for prints and marks, but didn't see anything. The leaves were really heavy there and blowing all over. They closed with, "We thought this was once in a lifetime thing, and we thought it was so cool. Yes, Bigfoot does exist." And just in case you think the BFRO just took a submitted report, the site reported that it did a follow-up and spoke with the witnesses, and even names them on the site and found their testimony to be very credible. It's a pretty thorough report and breakdown. You can read it all here. The investigator put it all together, Matthew Moneymaker. Folks might remember him as the co-host of Finding Bigfoot, which aired on Animal Planet from 2011 until 2018. They got the dates wrong on the airing of Finding Bigfoot. So a pretty cool article about something going on in the Keystone State. Stuff. I'm also going to include a couple of links to a couple of websites that I feel are worthy of that appellation. Discovery of the Sasquatch, SasquatchBiologist.org, the late Dr. John Bindernagel's website, and also Cliff Barackman's website. There's supposed to be a picture of Cliff right here, apparently. something happened to the picture. But I'm going to include the link to that as well for you guys to peruse. I would especially encourage checking out his footprint database. It's cool stuff. He's got all kinds of footprint casts there and the information behind all of them. So I highly recommend checking it out. Has Bigfoot been spotted on Google Earth? Possibly. This right here may be a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Probably not, but it might be. A Google Earth image circulating online appears to show Bigfoot lurking in a Colorado forest, though it would seem that the curious anomaly is, sadly, probably not Sasquatch and inadvertently captured via satellite. The peculiar oddity was first discovered a few years ago, though found new life earlier this week when it was shared in a Reddit forum devoted to the famed cryptid. The photo, which can be seen in greater detail on Google Earth here, is a remote part of the Uncompahgre National Forest in the state of Colorado. Within that image is a curious shape that resembles a sizable dark bipedal figure walking through an open area of land. While the person who recently posted the image online conceded that the anomaly could be a bear or a hiker without any gear or even just a puddle, its eerie resemblance to the iconic depiction of Bigfoot led many to wonder if Google's satellite had somehow managed to spot Sasquatch. Alas, while this would truly be a fantastic development, further examination of the photo found that the cryptid was most likely a small natural body of water since it appears in different forms in various satellite images over the years. Be that as it may, one imagines that the picture will continue to pop up online every few years as it gets rediscovered by astounded Bigfoot enthusiasts. So it may not be a Sasquatch. It's a pretty curious looking puddle, I'll tell you that much. But if indeed it's just a puddle, then it's pretty weirdly shaped. It's an interesting shape. But if it's just a puddle, then, oh well. Better luck next time. Here's something interesting about the Loch Ness Monster. Statistical study suggests Loch Ness Monster is not an enormous eel. The intriguing new statistical study seemingly strikes a significant blow to the long-standing theory that the Loch Ness Monster could be a giant European eel. For decades, the proverbial eel hypothesis has been seen as the most likely explanation for the mysterious creature that bewildered witnesses occasionally spot at the iconic Scottish site. The theory was bolstered by a 2019 environmental DNA study which found that the creatures were particularly plentiful in Loch Ness. However, a newly published paper from data analyst Flo Foxon suggests that the likelihood of Nessie being a giant eel is actually shockingly low. The fairly straightforward study postulates that Loch Ness has a breeding population of around 8,000 eels, and that the creatures generally grow to a length of around 2 to 2.5 feet long. Taking those two factors into account, Foxon argues that there is a mere 1 in 50,000 chance that an eel measuring around 1 meter, 3.2 feet, would emerge over the course of a few generations. To that end, he observes that a 3-foot-long Nessie is not quite the monster postulated by legend and lore. Taking the concept further, Faxon indicates that the chances of a 20-foot-long eel existing in Loch Ness is essentially zero. Based on this analysis, Foxon posits that large eels may account for some of the sightings of large animate objects rising to the loch's surface. The creatures are an unlikely explanation for extraordinarily large animals said to be spotted by some witnesses. In those instances, he theorizes that the Nessie in question could be waves or the occasional stray mammal, among other prosaic possibilities. Ultimately, Fox and mused that when it comes to the Loch Ness Monster, if it's real, it could be an eel, but not a very large one. What's your take on this new study, and does it change your mind about what Nessie might be? Share your thoughts with us at the C2C Coast to Coast AM Facebook page. So, very interesting. I'm not sure how big eels get. Do they get 20 feet long? I don't know. I wouldn't think so. I think three. I think 3 feet or 3.2 feet is about the limit that they get to. I'm not an eel expert, so I can't say exactly how big they get. But it's very interesting. Could people be seeing eels? Most likely not, according to this article. Finally, I have a book review to share of a new book that I just finished called Sasquatch Discoverer, the biography of Dr. John Bindernagel by Terrence N. James, who was a good friend of Dr. Bindernagel's. Wonderful look at a truly genuine individual. Wildlife biologist Dr. John Bindernagel was many things: an ecologist, an avid bird watcher, a lover of all wildlife, but he was, most importantly to him, a great husband and father. This biographical look at his life is truly terrific. It does not delve into his Sasquatch research right away, which is nice. It talks about his work with conservation and ecology in Africa, Iran, South America, and other countries. There are comments throughout from his wife and kids about his love of nature and wildlife as well. Wonderful remembrances of his passion for wildlife. The Sasquatch research he was involved in gets its own section, and his thoughts are well documented. His thoughts on the media's role in covering the Sasquatch mystery, eyewitness reports. He always listened to eyewitnesses and valued confidentiality if the eyewitness requested it. His passion for espousing that the Sasquatch has already been discovered and just not acknowledged by mainstream science, and his legacy and the importance of having his files in the right hands after his passing. John was a wonderful and genuine human being and a true inspiration for so many of us, not just for his Sasquatch research, but for how to be a truly wonderful person. This is a great book, not just for Sasquatch researchers, but for biography readers as well. This book gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Now, I highly recommend it, but it's on Amazon. The book is on Amazon, by the way. It's also at HancockHouse.com. But as I mentioned, it is on Amazon. So, it's a biography I highly recommend. And that's going to do it for this week. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. You guys are the heart of the show. I always say that, but I always mean it. And I will continue this as long as you guys want me to. And hey, until next week, y'all be good or be good at it. This is May-HBM Crypto-Corner.